We live in interesting times. Today's stories. Argentines protest over food crisis. Macron and Conte call for an overhaul of the EU migrant policy. Health fears prompt the Swiss 5G revolt. Indonesia is returning hundreds of containers of waste to the West. Hondurans worry about severe water shortages as drought continues. South Africa's Ramaphosa pledges to tackle violence against women. Powell on negative rates, divided committee and independence from Trump. President Trump says there are, quote, many options on Iran response. Plus, ahead of the United Nations General Assembly, Guterres says, quote, we are losing the race against climate change. And Aid to Humanity reaches out to OFWs and students in Brisbane, Australia. This is Eagle News, broadcasting from Las Vegas, bringing you stories from around the globe. I'm Anna Kui. Social organizations and labor groups protest in front of Argentina's Congress as lawmakers discuss the declaration of a food emergency in the country.
Si en la Argentina, que produce alimentos para más de 400 millones de personas, tenemos que salir a votar una ley de emergencia alimentaria, está a las claras que en realidad la crisis social es muy grande.
La situación de las familias es angustiante, el poder adquisitivo se ha perdido año tras año con el aumento de la inflación y con el congelamiento de los salarios. La realidad es que la mitad del país la mitad de nuestros niños están por debajo de la línea de pobreza, un tercio del país está por debajo de la línea de pobreza y eso no es nada más y nada menos que hambre en las familias de nuestro país.
French President Emmanuel Macron and Italian Prime Minister Giuseppe Conte called Wednesday for a reform of Europe's, quote, ineffective EU immigration policy, bemoaning a lack of solidarity as they met to turn the page on Italy's previous anti-migrant populist government.
En Europe, je l'ai dit, l'Union européenne n'a pas fait suffisamment preuve de solidarité avec les pays de première arrivée, notamment l'Italie. Et la France est prête à évoluer sur ce point dans le cadre de la remise à plat des accords de Dublin. Et je souhaite que nous puissions ensemble travailler à une solution nouvelle, plus forte et plus solidaire. Et je crois là aussi que nous pourrons défendre une position commune avec la nouvelle Commission européenne pour que tous les pays participent, sous une forme ou une autre, à la solidarité européenne en la matière, ou bien soient pénalisés financièrement. Et c'est aussi un message fort et clair envoyé au peuple italien d'amitié de la part du peuple français. Votre président l'a dit il y a quelques mois, cette amitié est indestructible. Parfois, nous ne sommes pas d'accord, il se peut qu'on se dispute, il se peut qu'on ne se comprenne pas, mais toujours on se retrouve.
Macron called for an agreement in which all EU countries would take part, quote, or be punished financially, echoing an Italian demand. Italy and Malta are usually the first ports of call for migrants making the perilous journey across the Mediterranean from North Africa to Europe, but the two countries complain that they bear an unfair share of responsibility. Salvini was interior minister until he collapsed the government in a move that he thought would make him prime minister, but Conte and the Five Star Movement, which was allied with Salvini's League, managed to form a new government without him. He spent his 14 months in office taking a hardline position against migrants and the charities who rescue them, and the new Italian government is now seeking support to implement a pan-European migrant policy. Historical allies Paris and Rome are showing unity for the first time after 2 years of disagreement, largely because of the previous League Five-Star coalition. Salvini closed Italian ports to migrants and charity rescue vessels in a move that was broadly popular with Italians, but left beleaguered migrants stranded at sea for days, if not weeks. the week-old coalition of M5S and the center-left pro-European Democratic Party has pivoted away from the combative rhetoric of Salvini, who branded Macron, quote, arrogant and a hypocrite over immigration. Conte said, quote, migration is a complex phenomenon. It's vital for Europe to turn the page towards the structural and no longer emergency management of migrants. Migration must no longer be a theme of anti-European propaganda. The migrant deal, first put forward by the new Italian government, would put an end to case-by-case negotiations over who will take in those saved crossing the Mediterranean. France and Germany have reportedly given their green light to the new system, which could also involve Luxembourg, Malta, Portugal, Romania, and Spain.
I migranti, quindi siamo contro la migrazione, le immigrazioni clandestine, però abbiamo anche la necessità di gestire questo fenomeno in modo concreto, pratico, articolando vari livelli di iniziative. Soprattutto ho già avuto la piena disponibilità del Presidente Macron, e lo ringrazio pubblicamente, per una soluzione finalmente europea, un meccanismo europeo sugli sbarchi, sulla redistribuzione. Libia. Lo riteniamo fondamentale per quanto riguarda la Libia lavorare costruttivamente insieme, dobbiamo avere il medesimo obiettivo, anche coinvolgendo in questo tutti i nostri partner internazionali. Il nostro obiettivo è la stabilizzazione del Paese a partire dalla cessazione delle ostilità in vista della ripresa di un processo economico.
Switzerland was among the first countries to begin deploying 5G, but health fears over radiation from the antennas that carry the next-generation mobile technology have sparked a nationwide revolt. Demonstrators against the technology are due to fill the streets of Bern later this month, but already a number of cantons have been pressured to put planned constructions of 5G-compatible antenna on ice.
Qui est devenue inutile, c'est-à-dire qu'aujourd'hui, si vous voulez voir des vidéos, YouTube, etc., eh bien vous avez tout ce qu'il vous faut sur votre portable, ça va tout à fait assez vite. Aussi, on a un problème énergétique par rapport à ces antennes 5G qui consomment beaucoup plus. Les portables aussi vont consommer beaucoup plus. Donc on a cette problématique-là aussi. Les cantons se sont levés, plusieurs cantons, 4 ou 5 cantons se sont levés, ont voté des moratoires. Ils ont été balayés quelques jours après par la Confédération qui, elle, a vendu les licences, a dit c'est pas de votre sort, vous ne pouvez pas décider. Et c'est finalement tout le système politique suisse qui est remis en cause finalement.
The technology has been swept up in the deepening trade war between China and the United States, which has tried to rein in Chinese giant Huawei, the world's leader in super-fast 5G equipment, over fears it will allow Beijing to spy on communications from countries that use its products and services. But far from the clash of the titans, a growing number of Swiss are voicing alarm at possible health effects from exposure to the electromagnetic rays radiating from the new antenna, and are threatening to put the issue to a referendum in the country famous for its direct democratic system. It wasn't supposed to be this way. In February, Switzerland took a big step towards deployment when it attributed 5G frequencies to 3 major operators, Swisscom, Sunrise, and Salt, allowing the country to rake in revenues of nearly 380 million Swiss francs, or $384 million. High on their success, the operators raced to trumpet on television advertisements and billboards that the cutting-edge technology would be available this year in cities, in the countryside, and even in mountainous regions. Authorities said by early July, 334 antenna stations for 5G were operational across the country. But the rollout has run into some serious hurdles. Several cantons, including Geneva, have buckled to pressure from online petitioners demanding a halt to construction of the 5G infrastructure. But while no new antenna are being built in parts of the country, the operators are still converting existing 4G antenna for 5G use, something they can do without authorization. National carrier Swisscom thus says it expects 90% of the population to have 5G access by the end of the year. Opponents, meanwhile, warn that 5G poses unprecedented health and environmental risk compared to previous generations of mobile technology, and are urging authorities to place a full-fledged moratorium on the rollout. Indonesia is sending hundreds of garbage-filled shipping containers back to their countries of origin, as the shipments were loaded with a combination of garbage, plastic waste, and hazardous materials in violation of import rules. The Southeast Asian nation pushes back against becoming a dumping ground for foreign trash.
Antaranya, ini yang sudah kita putuskan, ini harus direekspor. 9 ini terdiri dari 9 ini, ya, merupakan impor yang dilakukan oleh PT NHI, di mana mereka mengimpor, satu kawasan berikat ini mengimpor 138 kontainer yang berisi chips, biji plastik, kemudian staple fiber yang mereka lakukan dalam 3 kali.
Residents in Honduras expressed concern over severe water shortages after a government agency announced that due to the lack of rain and the low levels of water in dams, the delivery of drinking water will now take place once a week.
Que desde hace 29 años no se le ingresa a la red una gota de agua de represas. Y la ciudad ha crecido doble y triple. Tenemos 8,5 millones de metros cúbicos que tenemos para el mes de octubre, esperando que llueva. Ya hay indicios de que viene el agua, entonces eso esperamos.
Preocupado más que todo, ¿verdad? Porque imagínense un mes sin agua y cómo se llama y con familia.
Up next, South Africa's Ramaphosa pledges to tackle violence against women. Powell on negative rates, divided committee, and independence from Trump. President Trump says there are, quote, many options on Iran response. Plus, ahead of the United Nations General Assembly, Guterres says, quote, we are losing the race against climate change. Eagle News will be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back. You are watching Eagle News. I'm Anna Cui. South African President Cyril Ramaphosa announced an emergency plan to stop the resurgence in violence against women in the country. His remarks come after Women's Minister Maite Nokana Mashabane reported that more than 30 women were killed by their spouses in August alone. President Cyril Ramaphosa admitted Wednesday that South Africa is one of, quote, the most unsafe places in the world to be a woman, and announced an emergency plan to stop the resurgence in violence against them. Comparing the levels of such attacks to a war zone, Ramaphosa told a special session of the 2 chambers of parliament that, quote, there is a dark and heavy shadow across our land. Women and children are under siege. His remarks come after Women's Minister Maite Nokana Mashabane reported that more than 30 women were killed by their spouses in August alone.
Women are dying with protection orders in their homes, and we therefore need to pay attention to all this. Modernizing the criminal justice system is critical if we want to see real progress in the fight against gender-based violence. Because we are still using outdated technology and practices, we have problems with victim statements not being recorded accurately or even vanishing. Dockets just disappear and so forth, and the perpetrators go. The time comes in the life of a nation where there remains 2 choices, to submit or to fight. We are not a nation that submits. We have come too far to surrender to intolerance, to misogyny, and to violence. That we have come together here today, united by our determination to overcome this problem, shows the strength of our resolve. These are difficult issues to deal with, But at the same time, it is when it is difficult that all of us as leaders must get our people to engage in those debates. So let us work together so that our people may experience the best of times.
Police reported a nationwide average of 110 rapes a day last year. Promising legislation to force longer minimum sentences for crimes against women and children, Ramaphosa said a series of reforms would curb male-perpetrated violence. Ramaphosa said his government would release an extraordinary 1.1 billion rand, or $75 million budget over 6 months to fund the plan. He also announced the creation of a fund for private companies to finance prevention and education programs to stop violence against women. Ramaphosa said they will, quote, ensure that justice is served, perpetrators are held to account. Federal Reserve Chairman Chairman Powell said the central bank, quote, will continue to conduct monetary policy without regard to political considerations, after President Donald Trump accused the Fed of having, quote, failed again on Twitter. Powell also talked about the Fed not looking into using negative interest rates and said, quote, diverse perspectives are beneficial after the policy committee showed division, with 3 of the 10 voting members dissenting.
There are risks to this positive outlook, due particularly to weak global growth and trade developments. And if the economy does turn down, then a more extensive sequence of rate cuts could be appropriate. We don't see that. It's not what we expect. But we would certainly follow that path if it became appropriate. Sometimes, and there have been many of those times in my now almost 8 years at the Fed, many times when the direction is relatively clear and it's relatively easy to reach anonymity. This is a time of difficult judgments. And as you can see, disparate perspectives. And as I really do think that's nothing but healthy. And so I see a benefit in having those diverse perspectives. If we were to find ourselves at some future date, again at the effective lower bound, again, not something we are expecting, then I think we would look at using large-scale asset purchases and forward guidance. I do not think we'd be looking at using negative rates. I just don't think those will be at the top of our list. I'm not going to change my practice here today of not responding to comments or addressing comments made by elected officials. I will just say that I continue to believe that the independence of the Federal Reserve from direct political control has served the public well over time. And I assure you that my colleagues and I will continue to conduct monetary policy without regard to political considerations. While these issues are important for market functioning and market participants, they have no implications for the economy or the stance of monetary policy.
President Donald Trump said Wednesday he has, quote, many options in addition to military strikes against Iran, and all that details of newly announced sanctions will come within 48 hours.
Well, there are many options, as you know, Phil. There are many options. And there's the ultimate option, and there are options a lot less than that. And we'll see. We're in a very powerful position. Right now, we're in a very, very powerful position.
U.S. ally Saudi Arabia says Iran was behind a missile or drone attack, setting ablaze major oil facilities last weekend. Trump has so far appeared to resist calls from some in his Republican Party for a more aggressive response. Trump also referenced his frequent message that he wants to keep the United States out of conflicts in the Middle East. Referring to Iraq and other conflicts, he asked, how did that work out? Although U.S. officials have indicated they clearly believe the Saudi blame placed on Iran, despite Tehran's denial, Trump has yet to state this fully in public. Trump had reportedly been hoping for a dramatic encounter with Iranian President Hassan Rouhani at next week's UN General Assembly in New York. The crisis over the Saudi oil facilities attack appears to have made that meeting highly unlikely. On Wednesday, Iranian state media reported that Rouhani and his delegation were having trouble obtaining U.S. visas. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo declined to comment specifically on the case, but suggested that the Iranians should be denied because of what he said was the country's, quote, terrorism. Trump said, quote, if it was up to me, I'd let them come. Ahead of the annual United Nations General Assembly, Antonio Guterres warned, quote, "The world is at a critical moment," stressing the importance of tackling climate change. He said, "We are losing the race against climate change."
The world is at a critical moment on several fronts. The climate emergence, rising inequality, an increase in hatred and intolerance, as well as an alarming number of peace and security challenges. Tensions are rising everywhere. Let's face it, we have no time to lose. We are losing the race against climate change. Our world is off track in meeting the Sustainable Development Goals. We see trade wars and real wars and the spread of hateful words and deadly weapons.
Coming up, Aid to Humanity reaches out to OFWs and students in Brisbane, Australia. Eagle News will be right back. Welcome back. You are watching Eagle News. I'm Anna Cui. Looking after the welfare of overseas Filipino workers and Filipino students in Brisbane, Australia, the Iglesia Ni Cristo sponsored an Aid to Humanity event there. Eagle News correspondent Raylene Rose Javier has the details.
The members of the Iglesia Ni Cristo or Church of Christ continues to reach out to society in another milestone event, the Aid to Humanity, being held today in Metro Brisbane, Australia. More than 10% of overseas Filipino workers or OFWs have headed to Australia since 2017, and the number has been increasing throughout the years. Add that to the growing number of Filipinos who are in student visas opting to study in Australia as their way of finding a greater pathway. Realizing the challenges of the OFWs and the Filipino students in adjusting and transitioning to the Australian life and culture, the Iglesia Ni Cristo or Church of Christ organized the Aid to Humanity event to reach out to them and provide them with support and assistance.
The aim of this activity is to help our fellow men, and in this particular Aid to Humanity here in Brisbane, we are focusing or we are targeting our fellow Filipino who are still working here, having their working visas and student visas.
Reporting from Brisbane, Australia, this is Raylene Rose Javier, and I am 1 with 25.
Thanks, Raylene. That is today's Eagle News. Join us again tomorrow for the weekend edition. Visit our websites at eaglenews.net and eaglenewslive.com. Follow us on Twitter at twitter.com/eaglenews and on Facebook at facebook.com/eaglenews. Thank you for watching. I'm Anna Cui, and I'm 1 with 25.